right now on this planet. There are places that call themselves countries, have governments, passports, even their own money. But according to most of the world, they don't exist. Some of them are stuck in legal limbo from wars that ended decades ago. Some are brand new, created by a single person in a tiny strip of land nobody wanted. And some are at the center of the most explosive geopolitical tensions on Earth right now. In 2026, today we're going to visit 8 places that shouldn't exist, but absolutely do. Welcome back. If you're new here, this channel is your passport to the world's strangest, most fascinating country facts. And today's video might just be the most controversial one I've ever made. Before we start, drop in the comments, which of these do you think is a real country? Let's see what you think by the end. Let's go. Chapter 1, Kosovo. The newest country in Europe that half the world refuses to recognize. Let's start in Europe, because most people assume Europe is a stable, boring, well-mapped continent where borders haven't changed in decades. They are wrong. Meet Kosovo, a landlocked territory in the Balkans, sandwiched between Serbia, North Macedonia, Albania, and Montenegro. It declared independence from Serbia in February 2008, making it one of the youngest countries on Earth. So what's the problem? Over 100 countries recognize Kosovo as a sovereign state. The United States, most of the European Union, the United Kingdom, they all say, yes, Kosovo is a country. But Serbia? Never. And behind Serbia, there's Russia and China, 2 permanent members of the UN Security Council, who also refuse to recognize it. This matters enormously. Without UN membership, Kosovo can't join international organizations. It can't compete under its own flag in the FIFA World Cup. It can't be a member of Interpol. In some sense, internationally, it's stuck in a permanent legal childhood. Here's the fascinating part. Kosovo has its own government, its own police, its own currency, the euro, by the way, which they use without being in the Eurozone, which is a whole other story. And over 1.8 million people who fully believe they live in an independent country. Because they do. The question is just, does the rest of the world agree? The situation remains tense in 2026. Tensions with Serbia in the north have never fully gone away. NATO troops are still stationed there. And every few years, the world watches nervously. Kosovo exists. Kosovo functions. But for the international community, the debate is still very much open. Fun fact before we move on. Kosovo has a statue of Bill Clinton on one of its main boulevards because of the NATO intervention in 1999 that many Kosovars credit with helping them gain independence. You genuinely won't find that anywhere else in the world. Chapter 2, Transnistria. The Soviet country that never got the memo the USSR was over. If Kosovo is the country the world argues about, Transnistria is the country the world forgot. This one is genuinely wild. Officially, Transnistria does not exist. It is internationally recognized as part of Moldova, a small country wedged between Romania and Ukraine. But unofficially, Transnistria has had its own president, parliament, military, currency, passport, and national anthem since 1990. And it's been acting like its own country ever since. Here's the backstory. When the Soviet Union was collapsing in the early 1990s, the Russian-speaking population along the eastern bank of the Dniester River didn't want to be part of the new Moldova. They fought a brief but bloody war, declared independence, just sort of stayed independent. No country in the world formally recognizes Transnistria. Not even Russia, though Russia supports it heavily, with troops stationed there and energy subsidies keeping the lights on. What makes Transnistria special and kind of eerie is that it preserved Soviet aesthetics on purpose. You walk down the streets and there are Soviet symbols everywhere. Lenin statues, red stars on buildings. The currency features a hammer and sickle. It's like stepping into a country that's still living in 1985. In 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the world suddenly remembered Transnistria existed, because it's right there on Ukraine's western border, with Russian troops inside it. NATO and EU officials were genuinely concerned it could become a second front. It didn't. But for a few months, the world was nervously watching this tiny phantom country of 500,000 people. Today, Transnistria is in a strange equilibrium. It exports steel and electricity. Its citizens often hold Moldovan, Ukrainian, or Romanian passports alongside their Transnistrian ones, because those are the ones that actually work at airports. Imagine carrying a passport that no airline recognizes. That's life in Transnistria. Chapter 3, Somaliland, the most functional country you've never heard of. Now let's go to Africa, specifically to the Horn of Africa, where there's a story that almost nobody in the West knows about. And it's honestly one of the most impressive ones on this entire list. Most people know Somalia. It's been in the news for decades: civil war, famine, piracy. It's frequently listed as one of the most fragile states on Earth. But in the northwest corner of what is officially Somalia, there's a place that decided, we're done with all of that. This is Somaliland. In 1991, when the Somali central government collapsed, Somaliland, a region that was actually a separate British protectorate before Somali unification in 1960, declared independence. And then something remarkable happened. They built a functioning democracy from scratch in one of the most unstable regions on the planet. Somaliland has held multiple peaceful elections. It has its own currency, the Somaliland shilling. It has a working legal system, a functioning police force, and a capital city, Hargeisa, that is genuinely safe and growing. Compare that to the rest of Somalia, which is still struggling with Al-Shabaab insurgency and near-constant instability. And yet, 0 countries officially recognize Somaliland as a sovereign state. 0. Why? Because the African Union has a principle. Colonial-era borders should not be changed to prevent endless fragmentation across the continent. If Somaliland gets recognized, what stops 20 other separatist movements from demanding the same? It's a genuinely hard geopolitical problem with no easy answer. But here's what makes this story even more current. In 2024, Ethiopia signed a controversial deal to potentially get sea access through Somaliland, which Somalia furiously rejected and nearly triggered a regional war. That story is still unfolding in 2026. Somaliland is one of the most fascinating political experiments on Earth, a place building democracy in silence, while the world looks the other way. Chapter 4, Taiwan, the most dangerous question in global politics. Okay, we need to talk about Taiwan, and I want to be upfront. This is the most complicated, most politically charged entry on this list. I'm going to give you the facts. What you conclude is up to you. Taiwan, officially the Republic of China, is an island of about 23 million people off the southeastern coast of mainland China. It has its own government, its own military, its own currency, the new Taiwan dollar, its own Olympic team, though they compete as Chinese Taipei because of political pressure. It even has its own tech industry that makes the chips powering every device you're watching this on right now. The Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, manufactures over 90% of the world's most advanced chips. If Taiwan disappeared tomorrow, the global economy would collapse within months. That's not an exaggeration. So here's the situation. The People's Republic of China, mainland China, claims Taiwan is a breakaway province that will eventually be reunited with the mainland, by force if necessary. Taiwan considers itself a de facto independent country with its own democratic system. Most countries in the world follow a one China policy, meaning they officially acknowledge China's position and do not formally recognize Taiwan. Only around 12 small countries currently maintain official diplomatic relations with Taiwan. The United States officially acknowledges but does not recognize China's claim, a careful distinction that has kept peace for decades. But the U.S. also sells weapons to Taiwan and has strategic ambiguity about whether it would defend Taiwan militarily. In 2026, the Taiwan Strait remains one of the most watched bodies of water on Earth. Chinese military exercises around Taiwan have intensified. The U.S. and its allies hold naval drills in the Pacific every few months. The news cycle reminds the world that this is the conflict most likely to define the coming decade. And at the center of it all, 23 million people living their daily lives, going to night markets, building the world's most important ships, and navigating the impossible position of being a country that most of the world won't officially call a country. Whatever your political views on the status of Taiwan, that reality is worth pausing on. Chapter 5, Liberland, the country founded by one man on a disputed strip of land in Europe. All right, we need a lighter story after Taiwan. And this one is genuinely one of the most absurd things to happen in modern geopolitics. Meet Liberland, the Free Republic of Liberland. On April 13, 2015, a Czech politician and libertarian activist named Vít Jedlička planted a flag on a small, uninhabited piece of land on the western bank of the Danube River, a strip of territory that, due to a quirk in the border dispute between Croatia and Serbia, was technically unclaimed by either country. Jedlička declared it a new country, named it Liberland, and put up a website. Within days, he had over 500,000 applications for citizenship from around the world. This is not a joke. People desperately wanted citizenship in a country that consisted of about 7 square kilometers of swampy forest with 0 buildings, 0 infrastructure, and 0 internationally recognized legal status. Why did people want it? Because Liberland's constitution promises almost no taxes, maximum personal freedom, and a government based on voluntary participation. It's a libertarian dream encoded into a nation-state. The problem? Croatia, which patrols the Danube, doesn't let anyone actually get there. Multiple attempts to physically enter Liberland have been blocked or ended in arrest. Jedlička himself has been detained. As of 2026, Liberland exists primarily as an online community, a blockchain-based virtual governance experiment, and a recurring news story whenever things get slow in European politics. No country recognizes it. No one lives there. But it has a website, a president, a constitution, and approximately 7,000 people who consider themselves citizens. In the 21st century, apparently, that's enough to call yourself a country. Chapter 6, Nauru, the tiny island nation that went from richest to nearly bankrupt. Now let's go to the Pacific Ocean, where there's a country so small that if you blink on Google Maps, you'll miss it. Nauru, population, roughly 10,000 people. Area, 21 square kilometers. It is the 3rd smallest country in the world by area, and the smallest island nation on Earth. But size isn't the most interesting thing about Nauru. The most interesting thing is what happened to it. For most of the 20th century, Nauru sat on one of the largest deposits of phosphate, essentially fossilized bird droppings, used as fertilizer on the planet. In the 1970s and 80s, Nauru was per capita one of the wealthiest countries in the world. We're talking free houses for citizens, free healthcare, no income tax, a government-owned hotel in Melbourne, and a fleet of luxury cars on an island with barely any roads. And the phosphate ran out. Within a generation, Nauru went from flying high to an economic catastrophe. The land had been so thoroughly mined that 80% of the island's interior is now a wasteland of jagged coral pinnacles, completely uninhabitable and unusable. Nauru tried everything. It became a tax haven. It sold diplomatic recognition. There was a period where you could allegedly buy Nauruan recognition of your country in exchange for financial aid. Nauru at one point recognized Taiwan and then switched to recognizing the People's Republic of China, then switched back. Today, Nauru survives largely on Australian aid in exchange for hosting an offshore detention center for asylum seekers, a deeply controversial arrangement that human rights organizations have heavily criticized. Nauru officially exists. It has a UN seat, but its story is a cautionary tale about what happens when a nation builds everything on a single resource with no plan for what comes next. Chapter 7, Vatican City. The smallest country on Earth has its own army, bank, and passport. Here's one most people don't think of as shouldn't exist. But hear me out. Vatican City, 44 hectares, about 800 residents, completely surrounded by Rome, Italy. It is the smallest internationally recognized country in the world, and it is, in many ways, the most unusual. Vatican City has its own passports, among the most exclusive in the world, held by only a few hundred people. It has its own bank, the Istituto per l'Opera di Religione, the IR, which has been at the center of multiple financial scandals over the decades. It has its own radio station, its own post office, its own newspaper, and its own little army, the Pontifical Swiss Guard, whose members must be Catholic Swiss men between 19 and 30. Their ceremonial uniform, designed by Michelangelo, still worn today. Here's what makes Vatican City genuinely bizarre from a governance standpoint. It is an absolute monarchy. The Pope holds supreme legislative, executive, and judicial power. There are no elections for the leadership position. The Pope is chosen by the College of Cardinals in secret, with white smoke. In 2026, this is one of the few remaining absolute monarchies on Earth. In the middle of one of the world's most famous tourist cities, Vatican City maintains diplomatic relations with 183 countries. It has observer status at the United Nations. When the Pope speaks, world leaders listen. For a place that fits inside a New York City neighborhood, it holds an almost incomprehensible amount of soft power. Chapter 8, Palestine, the most contested piece of land in the history of the world. And we come to perhaps the most discussed, most debated, most contested piece of land in the history of civilization, Palestine. The Palestinian territories, the West Bank and Gaza Strip, are home to approximately 5 million people who identify as Palestinian. As of 2026, 146 out of 193 United Nations member states recognize the state of Palestine as a sovereign country. That is the majority of the world. Palestine has observer state status at the United Nations since 2012. Not full membership, but presence. The Palestinian Authority governs parts of the West Bank. Hamas controls Gaza. Israel, which occupies and controls significant portions of the territory, does not recognize Palestinian sovereignty. The United States and several Western nations, while generally supporting a two-state solution in principle, have not formally recognized Palestine as a state. The conflict here goes back generations, with roots in the post-World War I British Mandate, the 1947 UN Partition Plan, the wars of 1948 and 1967, and decades of failed peace negotiations. In October 2023, Hamas launched a large-scale attack on Israel, killing approximately 1,200 people. Israel's military response in Gaza has been devastating, killing tens of thousands and displacing over 1 million people. The humanitarian situation has drawn condemnation from around the world, along with intense international legal proceedings. By 2024 and into 2025 and 2026, several countries that had never recognized Palestine, including Ireland, Norway, Spain, and others, formally extended recognition in rapid succession, in a direct political response to the crisis. The question of Palestine is not a geography question. It is a question of identity, survival, history, and justice, felt intensely by millions of people on every side of this conflict. Palestine exists in the hearts of millions. Whether it exists as a state recognized by everyone is one of the defining unresolved questions of our time. So there you have it. 8 places that challenge everything you think you know about what a country even is. Is a country defined by its government? Nauru and Vatican City check that box. By international recognition? Kosovo, and Somaliland struggle there. By the will of its people, Taiwan and Palestine are living proof that millions of humans can build a functioning society that the world refuses to officially acknowledge. The truth is, the line between country and not country has always been drawn by power, not by logic. The borders on your map were almost never drawn by the people who live inside them. And that's what makes geography not just interesting, but urgent. These aren't abstract political questions. They're the lived reality of tens of millions of human beings in 2026. If this video made you see the world a little differently, or if you already knew all of these and want to see which country we should cover next, drop in the comments. And I want to know, after watching this, which of these do you think deserves full international recognition? Vote in the poll I just pinned. If you made it this far, you're clearly someone who loves going deep on this stuff. Subscribe, we do this every week. And watch the next video. Thank you for watching until the end.